All right, guys, let's carry on with the Constitution of, of the World Health Organization. Constitution of the WHO. We're on Chapter 12, Article 55, Budget and Expenses. Budget and expenses. So, somebody passing by. Good thing I'm weird. It's in my car. So, the Constitution of the World Health Organization, Chapter 12, Budget and Expenses, Article 55. The Director General shall prepare and submit to the Board the budget estimates of the organization. The Board shall consider and submit to the Health Assembly such budget estimates, together with any recommendations the Board may deem advisable. Article 56. Subject to any agreement between the organization and the United Nations, the Health Assembly shall review and approve the budget estimates and shall apportion the expenses among the members in accordance with a scale to be fixed by the Health Assembly. Article 57. The Health Assembly or the Board acting on behalf of the Health Assembly may accept and administer gifts and bequests made to the organization, provided that the conditions attached to such gifts or bequests are acceptable to the Health Assembly. The Health Assembly or the Board acting on behalf of the Health Assembly may accept and administer gifts and bequests made to the organization, provided that the conditions attached to such gifts or bequests are acceptable. Or like, I'm giving you this, but on a certain condition. So it's saying, like, it's an interesting one right here. Gifts, may accept and administer gifts. Health Assembly. What does that even mean, gifts, though? Like, what? As long as the conditions attached to such gifts or bequests are acceptable to the Health Assembly or the Board and are consistent with the objective and policies of the organization. Thou who donates the most, that whatever country donates the most will be the healthiest one. So Article 58, a special fund to be used at the discretion of the Board shall be established to meet emergencies and unforeseen contingencies. Special fund to meet emergencies and unforeseen contingencies. Like A based off B, meaning contingencies. Oh, that's contingent off of that. Well, that'll happen only if this happens first, right? Chapter 13, voting. Voting. So that was chapter 12, expenses. Then we got chapter 13, voting. Article 59 of chapter 13, voting. Each member shall have one vote in the Health Assembly. Article 60 has A, B, and C. So Article 60A, decisions of the Health Assembly on important questions shall be made by a 2/3 majority of the members present and voting. 2/3. 2/3 by members. These questions shall include, Article 60 of Chapter 13, voting, number A. Decisions of the Health Assembly on important questions shall be made by 2/3 majority. So decisions on important questions shall be made by a 2/3 majority of the members present and voting. These questions shall include the adoption of conventions or agreements, the approval of agreements bringing the organization into relation with the United Nations and intergovernmental organizations and agencies in accordance with Article 60, 69, 70, and 72 amendments to this Constitution. B, decisions on other questions, including the determination of additional categories of questions to be decided by a 2/3 majority, shall be made by a majority of the members present and voting. C, voting on analogous matters in the Board and in committees of the organization shall be made in accordance with paragraphs A and B of this article. Voting on analogous matters in the Board and in committees of the organization It's kind of vague. Analogous matters. Analogous is like, oh, that's kind of like a depiction or an image that sort of it makes a resemblance to something else. Analogous, like an analogy. I'm gonna make an analogy to prove my point. So anyway, we're on chapter 14, reports submitted by states. Chapter 14, reports submitted by states, Article 61. Each member shall report annually to the organization on the action taken and progress achieved in improving the health of its people. So Article 61. Each member shall report annually to the organization on the action taken and progress achieved in improving the health of its people. That sounds important, doesn't it? So you gotta give a report on how well the health of. So the members, like each state, really, a report on the health of the people. Contingent off of what? People actually go to the doctor? Like, this is bullshit. Like, America has a big say in this, right? Like, America, United Nations, like United States of America, United Nations. It might translate into something else in another country. Yeah, it makes sense. But that whole idea of like a united country, a united thing, that came from America, and we have the worst fucking healthcare. That shit's insane, bro. I'm gonna make a note right here. Yet America has the worst healthcare. It's frustrating, man. This is frustrating. So that's chapter 14, article 61. This one's fucking annoying. Reports submitted by states. So anyway, article 62. Each member shall report annually on the action taken with respect to recommendations made to it by the organization and with respect to conventions, agreements, and regulations. Remember, the organization is like the one, like the all-seeing eye above. So all the small members, the local committees and the regional committees and the state or whatever the hell committees shall report annually on the action taken with respect to the recommendations made to it by the organization. Like, I think this will work for you, and so let them know like how it's, if you did implement it, how's it going, or also the mandated policies, like how's that going as well. So Article 63, each member shall communicate promptly to the organization important laws, regulations, official reports, and statistics pertaining to health which have been published in the state concerned. That's an important one. Statistics, very important. I mean, how else are you gonna get fucking? How else can you expect? What do they call something? Effectiveness. How else can you? How else can you see effectiveness if the statistics are leaning one way or the other, right? We don't see them. Article 64, each member shall provide statistical and epidemiological reports in a manner to be determined by the Health Assembly. So that's a good one too. Article 65, each member shall transmit upon the request of the board such additional information pertaining to health as may be practicable. Meaning, hey, whenever we need upon requests. So upon request of the board, you got to be prepared to show the books, Chapter 15, legal capacity, privileges, and immunities. Article 66, the organization shall enjoy. So this is legal capacity, privileges, and immunities. This might be an important one here. This is at 15, chapter 15. The organization shall enjoy in the territory of each member such legal capacity as may be necessary for the fulfillment of its objective and for the exercise of its functions. Trying to make sure it shows on. Fuck. So the organization shall enjoy Article 66 of Chapter 15, legal capacity, privileges, and immunities. The organization shall enjoy in the territory of each member such legal capacity as may be necessary for the fulfillment of its objective and for the exercise of its functions. Article 66 has A and B. No, Article 67 has A and B. A, the organization shall enjoy in the territory of each member such privileges and immunities as may be necessary for the fulfillment of its objective and for the exercise of its functions. B, representatives of members, persons designated to serve on the board, and technical and administrative personnel of the organization shall similarly enjoy such privileges and immunities as are necessary for the independent exercise of their functions in connection with the organization. Article 68, such legal capacity, privileges, and immunities shall be defined in a separate agreement to be prepared by the organization in consultation with the Secretary General of the United Nations and concluded between the members. I feel like United Nations is just the big dog. It's like, oh, we might as well, focus on health as well, right? We might as well get our hands on the power of wealth, you know? I mean, the power of health, excuse me. We want to know what's going on in the world. What kind of, that's why fucking they don't cure cancer, because it makes no money. So chapter 16, relations with other organizations. Article 69, the organization shall be brought into relation with the United Nations as one of the specialized agencies referred to in Article 57 of the Charter of the United Nations. The agreement or agreements bringing the organization into relation with the United Nations will be subject to approval by a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly. Hence, we were just talking about. Now they're into relations with the United Nations. Related to the UN. It says it right here. So I wonder, since Trump is not going to be part of the World Health Organization anymore, I wonder how that affects our relationship with the United Nations. Article 770, the organization shall establish effective relations and cooperate closely with such other intergovernmental organizations as may be desirable. Any formal agreement entered into with such organizations shall be subject to approval by a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly. Article 71. It's funny, the first article of this relations with other organizations, they mentioned the UN. So Article 71 of Chapter 16, relations with other organizations. Article 71. The organization may, on matters within its competence, make suitable arrangements for consultation and cooperation with non-governmental international organizations and with the consent of the government concerned, with national organizations, government or non-governmental. Article 72. Subject to approval by a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly, the organization may take over from any other international organization or agency whose purpose and activities lie within the field of competence of the organization such functions, resources, and obligations as may be conferred upon the organization by international agreement or by mutually acceptable arrangements entered into between the competent authorities of the respective organizations. So subject to the approval by, so this is 72, sounds so they're able to take over. That's what it says right here. So how am I supposed to interpret it? So Article 72 of Chapter 16, relations with other organizations. So Article 72. Subject to the approval by a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly, the organization may take over from any other international organization or agency whose purpose and activities lie within the field of competence. Like, it was also part of the health of that land or country or state, or that area, that geographical area. Remember how they mentioned that word, geographical? May take over from any other international organization or agency whose purpose and activities lie within the field of competence of the organization such functions, resources, and obligations as may be conferred upon the organization by international agreement or by mutually acceptable arrangements enter into in between competent authorities, respective organizations. So this is one thing that just keeps. I need to know. In the WHO, who is the Health Assembly? So okay, like I said, this is in the World Health Organization, the Health Assembly refers to the World Health Assembly, which is the primary decision-making body where delegates from all member states gather to set health priorities and policies for the organization. It's the governing body of the WHO where countries discuss and decide on global health strategies. Um, the function is to determine the WHO's priorities and policies. So let me. So the function is to determine the WHO's priorities and policies by WHO means the organization. And remember, in this constitution, when they bring up the organization, they're talking about the World Health Organization. So to determine the organization's priorities and policies by discussing and voting on resolutions related to global health issues, participants, the representatives from all organization member states attend the assembly, usually held annually, typically in May. Meetings are held at the WHO headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Hmm. So we're almost done. I'll probably just end up finishing it in this video. I want to write this down though. I want to write this down. Write it down in the front. And write it in the front. So the Health Assembly. The Health Assembly they meet annually WHO headquarters, WHO HQ in Geneva, Switzerland. Objectives also referred to, aka World Health Assembly. So their objective is the primary decision-making body. Primary decision-making body where delegates from all member states gather to set health priorities. Delegates from all member states gather to set health priorities and policies for the organization. The Health Assembly. And then you got the Director General. All right, guys, let's continue. Now we're on a new chapter, chapter 17, amendments. Chapter 17, amendments. Article 73, only one article. Texts of proposed amendments to this Constitution shall be communicated by the Director General to members at least 6 months in advance of their consideration by the Health Assembly. So the Health Assembly is the one that. So the Director General is probably the main voice, like the the main voice of like the speaker of the House, right? Director General is probably the Speaker of the Assembly. So he shall communicate to all the other members throughout, throughout the world that are part of the organization about the proposed amendments that are being considered by the Health Assembly. Amendments shall come into force for all members when adopted by a 2/3 vote of the Health Assembly. So the Health Assembly, and accepted by 2/3 of the members in accordance with the respective constitutional processes. Also, like 2/3 vote in the House in the Health Assembly, they vote on it and then say, well, then let's pass it on to the second vote. All of the smaller members, right, with less power, but they also have to have a 2/3 vote. That's pretty important right here. Now we're on chapter 18, interpretation. 74 has a little number 1 on top. The amendment to this article adopted by the 31st World Health Assembly has not yet come into force. So, chapter 18, interpretation, article 74. The Chinese, English, French, and Russian and Spanish texts of this constitution shall be regarded as equally authentic. Article 75. Any question or dispute concerning the interpretation or application of this constitution which is not settled by negotiation or by Health Assembly. Let me read it again. Article 75 of Chapter 18, interpretation. Any question or dispute concerning the interpretation or application of this constitution which is not settled by negotiation or by the Health Assembly shall be referred to the International Court of Justice. In conformity with the statute of the court, unless the parties concerned agree on another mode of settlement. Unless the parties concerned agree on another mode of settlement. International Court of Justice. Okay. Interesting. Article 76. Upon authorization by the General Assembly of the United Nations or upon authorization in accordance with any agreement between the organization and the United Nations, the organization may request the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion on any legal question arising within the competence of the organization. International Court of Justice. So Article 77. Again, right here. International Court of Justice. I never even knew there was one. I never knew there was an International Court of Justice. Now, Article 77, the Director General may appear before the court on behalf of the organization in connection with any proceedings arising out of any such request for an advisory opinion. He shall make arrangements for the presentation of the case before the court, including arrangements for the argument of different views on the question. Chapter 19, entry into force. Article 78, entry into force. Subject to the provisions of Chapter 3, this Constitution shall remain open to all states for signature or acceptance. Article 79. A. States may become parties in this Constitution by 1. Signature without reservation as to approval. 2. Signature subject to approval followed by acceptance, or 3. Acceptance. And then there's a B right here for Article 79. Acceptance shall be effected by the deposit of a formal instrument with the Secretary General of the United Nations. Maybe the UN is just some sort of administrator. I don't know. Article 80. This Constitution shall come into force when 26 members of the United Nations have become parties to it in accordance with the provisions of Article 79. This Constitution shall come into force when 26 members of the UN have become parties to it in accordance with the provisions of Article 79. Article 81. In accordance with Article 102 of the Charter of the United Nations, the Secretary General of the United Nations will register this Constitution when it has been signed without reservation as to approval on behalf of one state or upon the deposit of the first instrument of acceptance. Article 82. The Secretary General of the United Nations will inform states parties to this Constitution of the date when it has come into force. He will also inform them of the dates when other states have become parties to this Constitution, in faith whereof the undersigned representatives have been duly authorized for that purpose, sign this Constitution. Done in the city of New York this 22nd day of July 1946, and a single copy in Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish languages, each text being equally authentic. The original text shall be deposited in the archives of the United Nations. The Secretary General of the United Nations will send certified copies to each of the government represented at the conference. So in New York, 22nd of July, 1946. Date. New York, July 22nd, 1946. So a couple of things I want to put here. How much power does the WHO have? So it says it is responsible for providing leadership on global health matters, shaping the health research agenda, setting norms and standards, articulating evidence-based policy options, providing technical support to countries, and monitoring and assessing health trends. How far does WHO's power reach geographically? World Health The World Health Organization is in how many countries? So 194 member nations. From laboratories to battlefields, the United Nations Specialized Health Agency has been dedicated to the well-being of all people since 1948. It is guided by science and supported by its 194 member nations, including the United States, a co-founder that on Monday announced plans to withdraw. So 194 members. 194 members. Oh shit. 194 member nations currently. It said from what? From laboratories to battlefields? So United Nations Specialized Health Agency. United Nations. I'm having it in quotes. Specialized Health Agency. Interesting. Anyway, y'all, next I will be reading the Charter of the United Nations. That's what I'll be reading next, so stay tuned.